Just gonna be on for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, waiting for my medication to kick in so I can get some sleep. It's tricky working like early morning shifts. It's kind of hard to decide whether I should try to stay up after work and just go to bed early, or if I should go to bed right after work and try to sleep through the day. Right now, I've been trying to sleep through the day with limited success, I would say. So I have invested in Tylenol PM. Hello, welcome back. Been a while since we've chatted in a stream. What's your appointment today? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you'll have some things to talk about today. It is good to get those in. Someday, I'll have insurance again. Uh, June, I think, I'll have insurance. So my current plan is don't get sick or hurt, uh, which I already did. I'm not trying to give anybody an inappropriate hand gesture, but I got my finger caught in one of the belts at work like my second day, and just had to hide it. Just had to wrap it up and tape it up and not let anybody know that I was hurt, because you can't get hurt in your first few weeks. No, it would be another almost $500 a month to put me on her coverage. So eventually, UPS has really good insurance, like borderline free insurance. So eventually, I'll be able to take advantage of that. But they don't give you insurance until you've been there for 9 months. And I mean, I think that's bullshit. But I think my understanding is that they instituted that because their healthcare is so good that people would get on just so that they could go have their baby, right? And then they would quit. Now, my opinion, we should just make having a baby affordable, possibly free, considering our goddamn government is trying to convince women to be brood mothers again. If you want to encourage women to have children, make it free. I mean, also that's not even good. Like, there are so many other reasons why somebody might not want to be pregnant, other than just like how much it might cost to have the kid. But certainly affordability is one concern. If I'm gonna make a little tangent for a second. Oh yeah, my partner was telling me that they found out recently that when they were testing pads, they were just testing pads with water, sort of assuming, yeah, it's the same stuff. Uh, because it's men. And yeah, women get excluded from medical testing because they throw off the results. Now, again, there's two paths you can take there. Path one is, well, these women are throwing out off our results, so we need to exclude them. Path two would be, maybe women's bodies are interacting with this differently than men's bodies, so we should do a different study that's female participants. Um, there's this expression in coding. I know it. I'm not a coder, but the purpose of a system is what it does. There's an acronym that you will see sometimes that's it's not clever. It's just the purpose of a system is what it does. And the idea behind that is you can say that you're designing a program or a piece of software or even some hardware, right? A vehicle or something. You can say that you're designing it for one purpose, but what it does, the function of it, is what the design is for, right? If our public school system, for example, was designed to turn out highly educated, well prepared students, it would look different than the system we currently have, right? I mean, the purpose, this is me getting into slight conspiratorial thinking. I don't really know if it's this intentional, but the way it is working is what we need are people who can read and write, and then we can get them into low paying jobs or the military, right? We need an educated workforce because they have to know how to use a computer, because they have to know how to read an instruction manual, right? So you can't just have illiterate people in society because they won't be able to work. But we don't need them to be, thoughtful. We don't need them to be interested in school or creative or curious. We need to know that they know how to read and write and do some math so that we can employ them and pay them $9 an hour or whatever. Now, I don't know, right? I don't want to suggest that is necessarily the intent. I think it probably is. I've been reading about the history of labor and David Graeber, who I think is really interesting. Their Bullshit Jobs is really good, but the book was prompted by an essay. So if you haven't read it, which is possible, you may have, but if you haven't read it, I would suggest reading the essay just because you can get that done in 10 minutes. And if you decide you want to read the full book, I would say it's worth it, but the essay will give you sort of the crux of the argument. Anyway, I think it was in Bullshit Jobs where I learned that the school bell system, right, 50-minute period and a buzzer, was designed by factory owners or people with investments in factories to train children for factory work. Like, that's why this class periods are set up the way they are, is to prepare you to work in a factory, right? So if you wanted, and look, it is no secret. It is not, I mean, literally, it's not a secret. Republicans are on record. But, like, Republicans want to destroy the public school system. They are very opposed to the public school system. I was homeschooled because my mom was very opposed to the public school system for maybe some different reasons than a lot of Republicans are, but my parents are conservatives. My mom didn't want me getting indoctrinated in school. She also didn't want me getting bored in school, so we were able to move at a much quicker pace at home than I would have been in school. Anyway, point being, Republicans want to destroy the public school system. If we wanted to have good outcomes and equitable outcomes, which of course is a bad word to conservatives, equity, hate that. We don't want that. We don't want to give people the same shot, but whatever. If we wanted to do that, we could say, all right, all of the state and local property tax, whatever tax goes to fund the public schools the district, that just goes into one pot in the state, and it gets dispersed equally to each school, or proportionally, right, per student. Then you would not have the issue of schools in poor neighborhoods having no funding, and schools in rich neighborhoods, so I'm from Indiana. I mean, obviously in South Florida, I imagine you see this as well, but there's a very rich suburb, or maybe it's a city, outside of Indianapolis, North Indianapolis, called Avon and Carmel. Their school was going viral on TikTok a while back because Carmel's high school is nicer than a lot of colleges, because Carmel has a lot of money. And because they have a lot of money, they can put a lot of money in the school, right? Because of tax dollars. But poor schools have terrible buildings that have asbestos in them and aren't properly heated because they don't have a high enough tax income to fund the school properly. You could fix that in about a week if you really sat down and worked on it, right? Because that's not an issue of funding. That's an issue of allocation. You don't need a high school that is nicer than a lot of universities in terms of their campus. Because why? Why do you need that? You don't, right? You need a safe school that has enough classrooms and enough seats, but it doesn't have to look like the Apple campus. So we could solve that problem very easily. Do you want to have better results in lower income schools? Well, we could prioritize feeding students more, right? So that they have the food security. And you could pay teachers more. If you pay teachers more, you will attract a higher caliber of teacher, right? These are things that we could do if we wanted to do, right? If we wanted to improve the school system. But instead, what Republicans want to do is continue to cut funding and cut programs and cut access and focus on this testing that does not prepare students to understand anything, but it does show you that you can fire some teachers, I guess. And then you blame the teachers and the public school system when it fails, which you are intending to happen, right? You are setting the fire and then complaining that your building burned down. But conveniently enough, you have a new building, a charter school building, that can discriminate. You can turn students away. You're not required to teach every kid. I assume I've talked about it before on the stream. I assume you are aware of this, but one of the main reasons the private school system exists is for segregation. Literally, in Arkansas, right after the Little Rock Nine, right after forced integration in, I think, 1959, right after that, the state shut down the public high school system for 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years, and set up private schools. Well, the state didn't set up the private schools. People set up the private schools. White students could go to those private schools. They were, so their education did not necessarily take a hit. But because private schools are not required to admit every student, I wonder what happened in Arkansas. Right? So, I think private schools should be outlawed. I could maybe see some edge cases. But legitimately, I believe that because they exist to allow segregation. And not necessarily just skin color, right? But income is another thing, another factor. Religion is another factor. No, I think it's bad. I think we should make them illegal. But what Republicans want, And what they have been talking about is we need private schools and charter schools, and because they do better. And we're going to keep defunding public schools so that they perform worse. And then we can point at the problem we created and say, see, we told you. We need to get these kids into private schools and charter schools. And it's just bullshit. But it's not like people can't tell, right? It's not like it's not obvious. They just don't give a shit. They are willing to be vile, despicable segregationists. And nobody is going to stop them. Like, that's what we are learning. Nobody is stopping them. It's so frustrating. Obviously, I mean, look, our current political situation, I don't even... Too much to say, and not enough time, and who cares anyway, because I can bitch and moan for hours, and absolutely nothing will change. But oh God, I mean, the government has been shut down, and the FAA has been working without pay for a month because the president is a sex pervert, and the Republicans are too scared that they'll lose power to admit it. Like, not only is the president a sex pervert, many people associated with the president are also in that category of child touchers. And you know what? I'm sure some Democrats are too. And to them I say, go fuck yourselves. Because, you know, I am very far to the left of the Democratic Party. And if you have child touchers in office, you should have enough standards to say, I don't care what party they represent. I don't care. The party of wearing hats that say kill your local pedophile are also protecting some of the highest profile pedophiles in the country, and in many cases are themselves child touchers. Honestly, it is pretty consistent that the people who are the most vocal about how much they hate pedophiles are hiding something. Not always true. I'll go on record as saying I think that child touching is bad, and I don't endorse it. But it is very common on the right wing to see men who are very concerned with children's gender and genitals and who is touching who. It is very common to find out that they have hard drives that would be illegal for me to look at. But you know what? What can you do? The Republican Party is not going to do anything about it. The Democrats don't have the power to do anything about it, and I am not convinced that they would anyway. You fundraise a lot better when you're in the opposition, you know? Another reason we should have wide-scale finance reform, campaign finance reform. But again, like it's a simple thing to solve. Just enforce the laws that are already on the books against the people who are very clearly breaking them. And then say, here's your election fund. You get $15,000. That's it. And it all comes from a governmental fund for political candidates, right? That's it. You get 15 grand. And that political ads get a special rate on local TV, so you don't have to worry about getting priced out of the market. But like, that's a simple problem to solve. You are not allowed to accept any donations. If you accept donations, you're disqualified. You know, just fine. You can run $15,000 worth of ads 2 weeks up to the election, and then, you know, we could make voting mandatory, right? Australia has mandated voting, and I think they have like 96% turnout. And some people argue, conservatives mostly, Well, then you have these, uneducated, uninformed voters just going and checking a box. And I would say, how is that different from now? Because if you're watching, first of all, if you think you're politically educated and you're watching goddamn Tucker Carlson, you are less informed than somebody who only watches ESPN or fucking Real Housewives. And I mean that sincerely. You are the opposite of informed. You are misinformed. But, like, again, we could solve these problems if we had any interest in doing so. Obama in goddamn, and this is another thing, right? I I am happy that we, as a country, were able to elect a non-white person as president, and Obama, he was he gave good speeches. He did get the ACA through, which is pitiful considering that the Dems had a trifecta, and but he gave a speech where they were asking him about single payer, eliminating private insurance, or significantly reducing private insurance, and he was like, well, what about the jobs? What about there's 2 million people that work in insurance, and if we remove insurance, then those people won't have jobs. Never mind that those jobs, this is something that David Graeber brought up. These are jobs that don't need to exist. They could be removed entirely, and we could just have point of service healthcare. And some of the people that are already in insurance could maybe move into like the public health system, right? But by and large, you could get rid of private insurance companies. And absolutely, the people who work there would be left without jobs. And to that, I say, goddamn, learn to code, I guess. That's a little bit flippant. It would be terrible to kick all those people out of employment, but maybe we should have a solution for that. There are so many ways we could solve the problems that we are currently facing. We could just pay people UBI, right? Some form of, you get X amount of dollars per month, and whatever job you have, you get to keep on top of it. Doesn't matter, right? If you're an accountant or if you work at McDonald's, doesn't matter. That money that you make at your job is on top of your basic living money. We could mandate free housing, right? We could do massive price reform on housing and say you can't charge more than $500 a month anywhere in the country. Right? I mean, we could do that. A lot of people would be mad, but almost everybody would be able to afford housing. But again, I consider housing something that should be a human right. Everybody needs housing, right? Very, very few people live on the street because they like living on the street. Everybody needs housing. It's a human need. Food, water, shelter. So we could just say, hey, everybody needs food. Everybody needs shelter. Shelter's free. You just because you are a human being, because you could even say citizens, which is, allows you to exclude some people, but because you reside in this country and we have the money to do it, we will make sure that nobody has to be without housing. You can choose to be without housing, but you will have access to it regardless of your income, race, gender. We could do that. And we're not. Because it's more important that some private corporations are able to make unbelievable amounts of money for keeping apartments empty. I'm a smart guy. or I'm not going to say I'm not, but I'm not an economist. I'm not an accountant. I'm not an actuary. I'm not a statistician. I am not somebody who is super highly technically educated on a lot of these topics. But I don't think this is complicated. You just say, we're going to tax people. We're going to tax the rich people because fuck them, they can afford it. And you get a lot more money taxing one rich person than you do taxing 20 poor people, right? It's just, and they miss it less. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to buy up or subsidize a ton of housing, maybe all housing, or, most housing, apartment housing, whatever. And we are going to say people can live there. It would take more than a week. That would take more than a week. But it could be done. And there's just no appetite to do it. Have a good therapy, Just cry if you need to. Do the stuff. Be open and vulnerable, whatever. And we'll chat again later. And I will try to ramp down my anger and get some sleep. I'm tired, but I'm fired up, All right.